Hey friends, I'm really hoping. Oh, look, there it is. There's my screen. All right, so we're doing this. Welcome to Power Moves. We're going to talk a little bit about change making, as well as a brief history of philanthropy in the United States. So before we get started, as Donna shared, my name is Rachel D'Souza. I am coming at you from St. Louis, Missouri, which, if you have been paying attention, was hit by an F3 tornado about a week ago. And so, in addition to telling you a little bit about myself, I will also tell you that my firm, Gladiator Consulting, is leading a mutual aid effort. So, if you feel comfortable and if you are able to share any resources that we can provide directly to impacted residents, I have my Cash App and my Venmo up here. Would love the solidarity from outside our community. So, now that I've gotten that out of the way, I am a mama. I am the daughter of South Asian immigrants, and I am a brown girl in the Midwest who thought one day at the age of 17 that doing justice and equity work is what my calling was. So I am very excited to be here with you today as someone who was engaging in community-centric fundraising work before the movement started. So yay. All right, so we're going to start out with a little bit of a vocabulary primer. And I definitely want to name that. For some of you, these words might be new. There might be questions about them. And I'm not going to sit here and go through all of them with you today, but would love to highlight and honor the wisdom in the chat. So as folks have questions and I'm presenting, please feel all of your lived experience, all of your wisdom. Please feel able to share that with the folks here, because I know that I won't be able to get to everything. But if there are words on here that you have not heard before or do not feel familiar, if you want to go ahead and drop those in the chat now so y'all can start talking about crowdsourcing their definitions, that would be wonderful. So we are going to start with a brief and a really brief history of U.S. philanthropy. So let's take ourselves back before colonization, and remember that in like the 1500s is the first time that the word philanthropy popped up. And what it means, right, as its historic root, is the love of humankind. And what we know, right, over time is that words change, the meaning of words change. And so oftentimes when I'm giving this presentation and I say, tell me what philanthropy is, or tell me who is a philanthropist, most people will say, philanthropy is when you give lots of money away. And then I'll say, who is a philanthropist? And I'll hear Bill Gates or Melinda French Gates or Warren Buffett. And then my next question is, does Bill Gates love you? Does Jeff Bezos love you? Do you think Mackenzie Scott loves you? Right? Do they? Is that what philanthropy means in the present day in the United States? Right? Do you? I love it. Okay, rich white people on the chat. I'm here for that. Right? So we in this country, unfortunately, took the concept of philanthropy and we married it up with capitalism, right? And ultimately have created the system in which we find ourselves today. So I'm hoping that you recognize the folks on my screen. But the guy in the bottom left corner is Andrew Carnegie. So Andrew Carnegie authored what is known as the Gospel of Wealth back in the late 1800s. And that letter that he wrote to his other wealthy white peers of the day essentially set the foundation for what we experience as a civil society in the United States. So if you have not read the Gospel of Wealth, I invite you to Google, right? Or you can chat GPT a summary or DeepSeek, whichever one uses less energy, right? Because that's an important document. And one of the things that is always important to understand is that Andrew Carnegie was talking to the people, right, the citizens who were his peers, who were considered people in 1889. So when we think about who was a person, right, who was a person who was making the laws and who did the laws apply to in 1889. We're talking about white, land owning, Christian, likely cisgender, likely in a heterosexual relationship, right? Men. That's who we're talking about. So I'm curious who on this call right now was a person in 1889. And you can feel free to raise your hand in the chat. We're not going to come after you, right? Because we're talking about systems. We're not coming after individuals. But it is likely that a lot of you that are on this call today weren't people, right? Like 150 years ago. And so these men who were gaining their wealth through very extractive capitalism, we've heard about the Industrial Revolution, the labor rights movement that it spurred, right? All of these men are making a ton of money. And essentially, they say, well, we are so blessed, right? We are so blessed with these resources that we have to take care of our community. But no one asked the community what they needed, right? They decided, well, we think communities should be literate. So Andrew Carnegie is one of the people who is responsible for the proliferation of library systems that we have in the United States, which is lovely. He is also responsible for a lot of the pollution that we have in the ground and the climate change that we are experiencing now. But do you think that he did anything about those things? Did he? No, I don't think so, right? Do we know who the person in the top left corner is? Oh, and someone already dropped it in the chat. Why, thank you. That is Madam CJ Walker. Do we know who Madam CJ Walker is? Anyone want to drop that in the chat? She was the first self-made Black woman millionaire. Okay. She made her wealth by creating hair care products and other products for other Black women, right, of her time period. She was just as philanthropic as Andrew Carnegie, right? She gave all kinds of money away. Why don't we know about what she was doing? Does anybody know? Right? She wasn't telling the world to follow her. She went to her community and said, what do I need to do? What do y'all need me to do for us to get out of these cycles of poverty, right? To change our circumstances. So you have a person like Madam CJ Walker who is working in the community that she came from, is redistributing the resources from the wealth that she has made in order to improve the livelihood, right, of the generations coming after her. And then you have Andrew Carnegie, who is telling people that wealthy men have the opportunity to decide, right, what's good for everybody else, to make the decisions. The decisions are theirs. They deserve the decisions because they're wealthy, right, and they have privilege. And that they knew what was best. And so that has sort of informed how philanthropy has evolved over the course of the last 150 years. So we get to 1917, World War I is ending, and the United States needs to make some money. And so we decide to pass the federal income tax. So that became law in 1917. Do you know what happened shortly after our federal government decided to do that? Anybody? There were some really wealthy white men who got real mad because they did not want to give their money to the government. So they went state by state, right? And they tried to get a system set up that would allow them to make decisions about their wealth and protect it from federal taxation. You know that system today as community foundations. So if your city, if your community has a community foundation, that is a direct result of wealthy white men in the early 1900s avoiding their tax liability as individuals and retaining wealth, right? Protecting their wealth to be able to make decisions about it. As we move through the 1900s, we start to get into a significant civil rights movement. So we see, the federal amendments 13, 14, and 15 that are passed that essentially give Black men the right to vote and name explicitly that Black people are citizens and can have equal rights, right, under our Constitution. We then, some years later, see women also gain the right to vote. It was in 1954 and 1969 that we have significant tax reform. So this is following World War II now. And in that tax reform, we get the structures that we now know as our modern day 501 organizations, right? 501c3s, 501c4s, 501c6s. That is where we also get introduced to the idea of boards. Okay. So it's not an accident. I want everyone to sit with this for a minute. It's not an accident that throughout the first half of the 19th century, we have people who are not equal, right? Who are not being treated equally under the law, saying, no, we actually get those rights. And there is ongoing civil unrest, there's ongoing organizing. And then the federal government comes in and says, yeah, you guys can keep organizing, but you need to have a tax designation. So we're going to make that up. And now you also need to have a board of directors because somebody has to keep an eye on what you do, right? And ideally, those people are going to be wealthy. Those people are going to be privileged, right? Those people are going to have power for you to advance your mission. So the nonprofit sector, everyone give yourself a little hug, in some ways came out of the reality of powerful people needing to control social movements. And this was the way that they did it. Okay. So we get to the 1980s. And has everyone heard of trickle down economics? Does it make you want to stab your eye a little bit? Or did you get really wealthy from trickle down economics, right? Did that actually work for anyone? Probably not. So in the 1980s, our federal government says, yeah, okay, we've been doing this reform work for years, and government has gotten too big. We really need to get out of the way. So we believe that if we create policies for people to continue to make money, that wealth will trickle down, and that everyone's going to be great, right? Did that happen? I'm looking at the chat, and I don't think y'all got wealthy from trickle down economics. It doesn't seem like we're balling right now. And so essentially, when this happened, we start to see this really wild proliferation of nonprofit organizations. And so over the course of the last 40 or so years, the government sets up grants.gov, right, and starts pushing tax money out to nonprofit organizations to do the work, right, to fill the responsibility of the government social safety net. So we wind up having this sort of unfettered growth, which has also put us in the, somewhat difficult place of feeling like we're fighting with each other for resources, even if we have a shared mission, even if we have shared opportunities and vision for our community. We find ourselves fighting for resources, right? So then we get into the 21st century and we get smacked with a recession right off the bat. And then things really start to shift politically. Okay. So Citizens United is a case that happens in our federal government in 2010. And Citizens United essentially gives corporations, gives businesses, which they deem a collection of individuals, the same freedoms as individual human beings, individual citizens. And so we essentially give businesses the same kind of freedom that individuals retain in the United States. And that's when we see capitalism really start to take off in a way that it was all right. We're already experiencing harm, but now the wealth gap has exploded. And instead of having resources trickling down, right, as someone named, over the course of the last 50 years, we've actually seen an insane amount of wealth move from the lowest 50% of people with resources to the top 10%. So this trickle down economics actually trickled upwards, right? Our middle class is shrinking. Our marginalized and folks with lesser resources is expanding. And we have more billionaires, right, in the United States living now than we have ever had. So we get to 2017. And here's where things really start to get messy for us, y'all. So in 2017, the first Trump administration passes the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Does everybody remember that? I hope. And in that, one of the things that changes is that we change the standard deduction for single filers. So we essentially double it. We also change it for head of household. We also change it for joint filers. So people who had been individual taxpayers, married taxpayers, head of households, who had been previously itemizing their taxes, they are now incentivized to take a different kind of deduction, right, for their giving. And what that means, and thank goodness for the National Bureau of Economic Research, because they are a nonpartisan think tank that provides us this data, they essentially learned that over the course of time, we've seen 23 million households switch from itemizing to taking a standard deduction. And what that has resulted in, generally speaking, is a drop per household in giving of about $880 per year. But when you annualize that, when you look at how that has been impacted between 2017 and at the end of 2024, it has resulted in a $16 billion drop, permanent annual drop in charitable giving in the United States by people who file their taxes, right? And what this report also found is that drop typically impacts people who are giving to grassroots or place-based organizations. So it's not universities that are suffering because of the tax changes. It's not large hospital systems or national nonprofits. It is place-based organizations that are in your community that typically have a budget of less than 5 million, probably less than 2.5 million, who are being impacted by this loss of resources. We start to see then this erosion of what we call civil society, right? Philanthropy and nonprofits working together. And so we've heard about the decline of trust in our sector. We've promised that we're going to do a lot of things for a long time, and we haven't done them, right? We this year have started to see our federal government want to change the rules about how the nonprofit sector functions and have largely cut off federal aid to a lot of those organizations. So if we look at what's happening, right, over the course of the sort of 150 years we've talked about, our sector has been built on essentially let's say three legs, right? We have a three-legged stool happening. We had the necessity of charitable giving by individuals, right? We have to have individuals with the will to lead those organizations. And we had support from the federal government. And so one leg gets a little swept with our tax policy changes. Another leg of the stool gets a little swept by the changes by the federal government to remove grants.gov funding. And so now we have a bunch of individuals in the sector who care about the work they do. Hopefully they stuck it out, right? They're not too burned out. But the money, the resources that we relied on, the systems of money that we have relied on are starting to evaporate, which means that we cannot keep doing the same things that we have done to sustain our work, to meet the needs of our community and other causes that we care about. So I'm going to take a page from Mina's book and ask y'all to take a breath if you can, because that's a lot. That's a lot that I've shared. And Tim, I've somehow lost the chat. Oh, nope, I found it again. Oh, yeah, I'm also going to shout out reading the book Insight. It's awesome. And yes, Julie, that was 16 billion with a B, a big, big B right there. All right, so the other thing that I want to offer that I think is important is that over the course of the last few years, we have notably seen more people with billions of dollars giving in different ways. And nonprofits seem to believe that if they could just get that one billionaire, right, if I could just get that one wealthy person to pay attention, we're going to be just fine. And I want to draw your attention to a report that our lovely partners, Neon One, dropped earlier this spring. I got a chance to snag my hard copy, but you can definitely go to Neon One's website and look at the generosity report that dropped. And one of the things that really stood out to me in this report as I was thinking about our presentation today was that 97.3% of donors give less than $5,000 per year across many organizations. For a long time, the sector has been focused on the size of a gift, right? And consistently upgrading our donors every year, right? We want to retain them and we want to grow their gift. But we focused on that for folks that we believe are more wealthy because they have more value to us. And what's actually true is that if we give ourselves the opportunity to engage and focus on retention and longevity, we wind up seeing that donors who are giving in their fifth year consecutively, at least in this study, accounted for 45% of the dollars raised by the organizations that Neon One studied. And there's this really incredible set of information I will tell you on page 17 and 18 of this report that talk about the annual average giving for individuals in this bracket. So, for example, donors who give in their first year tend to average about $187. By the time they're a 5-year donor, they're averaging a gift size of $606. Okay. So not only are we retaining them, but we're seeing their gift increase about 300% over the course of 5 years. So this is your gentle encouragement to consider how to build systems to engage the 97% of folks, right, who are in your communities, who changed the way they filed their taxes, right? So they're probably giving you a little less now. How do we reconnect with those folks? And how do we start to figure out how to center ourselves on longevity and staying the course instead of securing that one big gift, scrambling to the end of our fiscal year, right? And then hitting that reset button. So big shout out, big thank you to Neon One for sharing this data. So, how do we change what power means in the sector? My experience is that we have to talk about it like we do here in CCF, but we also have to name what we want to change and how we want to change it. So, when I think about this specifically, one of my favorite quotes comes from Audre Lorde. And one of the things that she shared is when I dare to be powerful, to use my strength in service of my vision, then it becomes less and less important whether I am afraid. I carry this quote close to me because I have been scared in my many jobs as fundraisers. I have confronted cultures of scarcity within organizations. And we have to give ourselves a chance to use our experience, to use our wisdom, to use our relationships to move forward towards a world that is more sustainable, a world that we want to be a part of, that we're excited to contribute to, right? And so if you're not, here and scared, that's okay. You might get scared soon. There's probably a lot of people on this call like me that are generally scared about what they might be waking up to, especially over the course of the last few months. And what I have learned is that when I have, swallowed the fear and I have muscled up and done my little superhero pose, trying something different gives me the opportunity to reimagine what's possible. And when you allow yourself, people in this sector, when you allow yourself to be curious and reimaginative, you give yourself the opportunity to build something that you didn't know was possible. And that is one of the reasons why I have been so honored to be a part of the community-centric fundraising movement. So let's talk about that a little bit. Oh my gosh, Skangry. Okay, Skangry is the new hashtag for folks here. We're scared and angry. Thanks for that, Nate. So community-centric fundraising. Community-centric fundraising is a fundraising movement grounded in equity, social justice, and prioritizing the entire community over organization. So right off the bat, y'all, we're telling you to do something different than what you've learned in your fundraising jobs, right? I remember when I started fundraising for the first time, I had the mission painted on the wall in my office. I had our mission at the top of every document that was printed out, right? Every agenda for every board meeting. I'm pretty sure I even had a t-shirt with the mission that was like stitched onto it, right? We talk so much about our individual organizations that we forgot that it takes a lot more than one person or one organization to solve the complex problems that have sort of been heaved onto our sector. So, community-centric fundraising, stop putting it in opposition to donor-centric fundraising. Donor-centric fundraising, specifically on its face, is a practice between an organization or a fundraiser and a donor that requires us to treat those donors well, honor them and honor their wishes. And the premise is that if we teach our donors, if we bring our donors along in this work, if we continue to keep them happy, they will give us more money. Okay. But when you look at the hard definition of donor centered fundraising, it actually doesn't say anything about the organization or its mission. It only talks about donors and money. So, right off the bat, that practice is missing something really important. So, there are valuable things about relationships that you can learn from donor centric fundraising, right? I'm not here to tell you that it's 100% bad, but it's one piece of a larger way to think about how we organize resources. So there is a place for some of the tactics of donor-centric fundraising within the movement of community-centric fundraising, but movements call us to do more, right? So I love these two quotes that came from Hildy Gottlieb, who also has an article on our hub. Movements begin with values. Fundraising has been grounded in values of donor appeasement and nonprofit survival. We all have horror stories about that. But CCF seeks to ground fundraising in values of equity and social justice, right? So we're not here to just move money. We're not here to just get a gift, make sure that the budget ends in the black, right? We are here to change the system so that it actually serves sustainably the communities and the causes that we need to advance. And movements seek sweeping change. We're not here to be a part of the status quo, right? We need every single person that is in this community to figure out what their skills and talents are and to use them in the direction of justice and, quite frankly, liberation, right? I saw abolished boards out here. Like, I am all about that, friends. Let's do it. So, what does it look like? What does it look like to be a part of a movement as an individual? Does anybody, let's look at this slide together. So you should see a list of names. Does anybody know who these people are? Does anybody recognize any of these names? Nope. I'm not. The chat has gone quiet. Oh, yeah, okay. Abigail knows Ella Baker. Who is Ella Baker? All right. Claudette Colvin. Yes. All right. Bayard Rustin. Awesome. All right. So y'all know individuals. Okay. Do you know why? Do you know who these people are? Do you know why they're in relationship? All right, I'm going to spell it. Yeah, freedom fighters. Okay, y'all. So all of these people, right? It was all of these people we needed for Rosa Parks and the Montgomery bus boycott. So, yep. All right, Andrea, there it is. Lots of the folks behind the Montgomery bus boycott, right? So change didn't happen, okay, because Rosa Parks got up one day and decided she wasn't going to move, right? It was years of planning. It was years of relationships. It was years of organizing community before this was possible. She needed her husband to drive her around. When it became too dangerous for Black folks to be driving around, she had to partner with Clifford and Virginia Durr, who were white people who would drive her around, who would drive her to organizing, right? Bayard Rustin helped organize the community. Claudette Colvin and Mary Louise Smith were two other Black women who refused to give up their seat before Rosa Parks. But because their skin was darker than Rosa's, their stories have not been told as loudly because the movement could not get behind them, right? So they tried and failed. Bus boycotting happened many times before Rosa Parks. There was a women's political council, Joanne Robinson. We had the faith leadership of Ralph Abernathy and Martin Luther King, right? It took hundreds of people to bring this change to life. So if community-centric fundraising feels hard to you, it might be because you're trying to do it alone. Let it go, friends, right? Community is survival. I think I said that on a call with Esther, my colleague here recently. We got to be willing to let our walls down. We got to be willing to bust the silos and change the way we've thought about this work, change the way we've thought about our institutions for us to do, right, the sustainable work of justice and change. So you can actually also Google this, right? Search this. There is an article that will tell you the whole story. It's called How Change Happens, the real story of the Mrs. Rosa Parks and the Montgomery bus boycott. But one of the quotes that came out of this article, I believe it was originally published on the Collective Impact Forums platform, and you can also find it on the Huffington Post. So this quote is, in our culture, we love stories about lone heroes, about the single protagonist who overcomes obstacles to achieve his or her goal, right? To make that better movie, to make that better story. But the true story of how change happens, however, is always far more complex. One could add many more names to the story or analyze any other social change effort and find similar networks of leaders. It doesn't diminish the courage of Mrs. Parks or the prophetic vision of Dr. King to acknowledge that their leadership was part of a larger leadership narrative. Do not fall for individuality and silos in this work, right? Community-centric fundraising has community in it, right? When we do this work well, we do it together. So some things for you to think about. I'm going to offer some tools, and then I think I might have time to dip into some questions. All right. So how do we do this, friends? Because at the end of the day, yes, we are responsible for ourselves and our actions before we are able to change anything else. So the first thing I'm going to offer to you is a document that I had the honor of using when I got to work with Forward Through Ferguson, which was the organization that was founded here in St. Louis after the murder of Mike Brown back in 2014. So you can go to Forward Through Ferguson's website and you can download this grid as well as a workbook that will tell you how to bring this to life in your organization. But when you think about change, we cannot do it all. And if we try to, we're not going to do it well. It's probably not sustainable. And there's a high likelihood that our effort's going to fail. So one thing that we need to think about as individuals and within our organizations is, are we trying to drive change on an individual level? Are we trying to do it on an institutional level? Or are we trying to bring change to the region in which our organization or our efforts are happening? And once we figure that out, the next piece is to figure out where folks are on that spectrum. Are you just raising awareness? Do people understand inequity, but now they're beginning to understand how it shows up? Or are your relationships, is your institution, is the region in a place where you can begin to transform towards equity? I will tell you from my experience, a lot of people look at this grid and they're like, we're ready to transform towards equity. And I'm like, you're so cute, but no, you're not. You're probably actually still in the awareness and understanding space. If you have not made decisions in your own life to change the way that your privilege shows up, if you have not made thoughtful decisions about where you spend your money, where you live, where your tax dollars go, what kind of transportation you use, where you spend your money, you are still in the awareness and understanding space. I will say to myself that I am still in the awareness and understanding space. There are a couple pieces where I'm like, oh yeah, I'm in the transformational space. But y'all, all of us here, no matter how hard we care, no matter how much we're in it, we are likely still in the awareness and understanding space. So be gentle with yourself when you realize that, because we tend on this side of life to get a little shame spirally when we realize that we're not super aligned with our values, right? That our behaviors might not be aligned with our values. This requires grace, right? Because we're changing something that has been true. It has been in the air that we breathe and the water that we drink for 150 years, if not more. That doesn't get to change overnight, right? It changes with thoughtfulness. It changes with trying. It changes with scraping our knees and letting our friends pick us up. taking that lesson and moving forward. So this is the first one. Oh, yes. And never spiral alone. Find a friend for that spiral. Okay. So the next tool that I love, and I'm a little obsessed with, maybe in an unhealthy way, is called the 3 Innovations Ambition Continuum. And so, one of the things that I also often find is that organizations know that they want to be a part of change, but they don't understand what that looks like and what kind of innovation and change is possible. So, this resource is actually a mashup of a lot of different sort of change theories. And it offers these spaces for where change can happen. So, incremental innovation, you guys, the chat is killing me. I love this so much. Incremental innovation is a type of change that allows us to improve the performance of existing systems. So, some of you might acknowledge that if we burn it down right now, a lot of people that we care about may suffer, right? A lot of entities that we care about, a lot of causes may suffer. So maybe you're not here to immediately burn it down, right? Maybe you're here to figure out, how do I keep this system right? How do I reduce the harm in the existing system? That is a great place to start, okay? That's a great place to start. If your goal is to look at your organization and think, what could we do differently that is going to cause less harm? Start there. Because the good news for you is that there is a high likelihood of success when you're in this column. Then we look at the middle column, which is called reform-oriented innovation. So this is when we make decisions to significantly change the shortcomings in our system. A lot of organizations, I think, who are deep in change work, who are advocacy organizations, organizations that are led by marginalized populations, typically fall into this space. Yes, Maria Rio, I will get you these slides, I promise. And yes, Kelly, I secretly have the lighter back here to burn it down. Don't worry. When we're in that sort of middle space, the feasibility of our change, it might take more time. We might need to get more people on our side. There might be more organizing. There might be a slightly higher level of risk. And you might experience resistance. So one of the places where I see this show up often is when people within organizations want to bring community members onto the board. But why would we have community members on our board? What would the value of that be? All the value, right? And so that's one place where a significant change to the way a system functions, right, can have mixed feedback, can be difficult to move. Then we get to the transformative innovation, which, for me, is the sexiest part of this, and also the hardest. But I really love a complex problem that, makes me lose sleep. So here we are building new systems based on radically different ideas. Okay. And so here, it's not predictable. We don't know what's going to happen. It is a change that we have not experienced, right? We are building something new. We are reimagining from a starting point. The viability of these kinds of changes are low. The risk that we take is pretty high when we make these changes. And resistance is also high. I will tell you, over the course of the last 10 days, as my firm Gladiator Consulting has led a mutual aid effort here in St. Louis on the ground, I've gotten a lot of pushback from organized philanthropy. I've gotten a lot of pushback from government, and I've gotten a lot of pushback from other residents in the community who have asked me, why would we give direct cash aid to these people? Why wouldn't we? They don't need a nonprofit to tell them what to eat. They don't need a funder to tell them how to rebuild their house. They have the autonomy and the power of self-determination to make decisions with the resources that I've raised to give them, right? But this is where, right, we start to see that when we are building a new system, when we are, or quite frankly, with mutual aid, when we're bringing an old one back to life, it makes folks really uncomfortable because it's not the way that things are. It's not the way that things work, right? So that last column is tough, and it is pretty incredible when we're able to bring that kind of change to life. The last, yeah, you guys, these people, someone literally said these people to me. It was like, I need to just go be in the community and not with y'all on this conference call. Whew, it was rough last week. All right. So the last one that I will offer is the social change ecosystem. And I will give you a little teaser about this. So the social change ecosystem map is a framework that individuals can use to figure out where they can show up in movements and change work. So Deepa Iyer, who is with Building Movements Project, created this, the ecosystem and its definitions shortly after community-centric fundraising launched as a movement. And the social change ecosystem essentially asks us to identify ourselves in one of these roles on the outside. So, weavers, experimenters, frontline responders, visionaries, builders, caregivers, disruptors, healers, storytellers, and guides. So, when we figure out who we are, and thanks, Chris, for dropping the link in the chat, we can start to figure out what our contribution is, right, to the work. I find myself moving through some different identities based on the tangly problem that I'm looking at. So sometimes I am a disruptor. Sometimes I have to be the visionary. I am definitely always the experimenter. And I do love being the weaver as well. So I've also had to start to think about like, where do I need to show up and what parts of my experiences are important for this? And the goal is that when we have folks that are in each of these places using their individual skills and talents to advance a movement, to advance change, then we get at these principles in the center, which are equity, liberation, justice, and solidarity. I am super honored to share with you that Deepa and I are working on a mashup between the social change ecosystem and the 10 principles of community-centric fundraising that I hope will be ready to go live on the hub in July, but maybe August, because y'all, it's summer. I'm kind of a summer girl. I like to spend my time outside in the grass. But July is my goal. So I will definitely encourage you to take a look at this and figure out what your role is. So my ask to y'all today is to decide where you are in this movement. So figure it out. There's not one starting line. I would love to tell you the work is linear, y'all. It's not linear. But we have to each decide where we want to get in, where we fit in, and where we are moving. So with that, I offer this like little itty bitty roadmap for y'all to think about within your own organizations. Okay. Take a look at your current practices. What power imbalances can you name? Build internal buy-in. This is not a solo journey. You have to find your friends who agree with you, and you also have to build relationships with your critics. If your critics and the people that disagree with you are not at the table, your change will not move forward, right? Because change takes everyone. So bring your naysayer along. It is the most uncomfortable, frustrating, and annoying thing, but we don't all have to be friends, right? We don't all have to be friends, but we all do have to care about the same outcomes for folks. Adopt trust-based principles. Listen. Start by listening, y'all. And use that to build long-term relationships, which sometimes requires sacrifice. Sometimes it requires you to take a gentle step back. And I'm not talking about harm, right? Let's not be in relationships that are causing us harm, but discomfort is an okay place to be. The last set of things I will offer is committing to transparency. Tell the truth. When you make a mistake, tell the truth. When you experience failure, tell us what you learned. Share what's working, share what's not working, and do that in community. And then talk about what success looks like. It's probably not the amount of money you've raised, but honestly, what I have looked at in this most recent generosity report, again, y'all, I'm going to call out Neon One's report again, is that it's not about the amount, it's about the longevity of the relationship. Okay, so that's where we need to be. What do our relationships look like? How are we keeping people in conversation? And you'll hear a little bit more about this on Tim's podcast next month. But how do we start to think about reciprocal generosity with our communities? If we are asking our donors to give, we are asking us to learn, and now we're going to ask them to change with us. How are we providing opportunities for learning? How are we providing opportunities to be that third space where people can come and they can feel seen and they can build relationships, not just with our organization, but with the communities that we serve, right? The neighbors that are in the space, right? We have a huge opportunity to change the narrative that is happening. And that requires us to get a little uncomfortable and to open our doors in ways that we maybe haven't done yet. So, with that, we'll offer this. What is one change you could implement immediately, either for yourself and your learning or within your organization? How can you start to challenge inequitable systems in your work? And how will you organize for sustainable change? Those are three things that I want you to think about. And I am happy to be a thought partner. I'm going to pop my contact information up here in a second. Actually, I'll put it up now. If you want to just jot that down or take a screenshot, I am happy to be in conversation. I learned a long time ago that this is not work that we do on our own. And so my inbox is open, my Zoom is open. Maybe please don't text me. My children do that enough, but we can get there. Maybe we'll get there. We'll see. But let's keep talking about it. So I will tell you one story real quick that I think will help us understand what community-centric fundraising can look like for folks. So a few years ago, back when we were in the midst of a pandemic, as y'all recall, George Floyd was murdered in Minneapolis. We actually just passed the 5-year anniversary of his passing. When that happened, I was the Justice Philanthropy Catalyst with Forward Through Ferguson, and we had a big fundraiser coming up that summer. And one of the reasons that we planned it is because when the pandemic started, our board made the decision to essentially cut our budget by 25% that year so that our team could redirect our time, our resources to helping direct service organizations fundraise so that kids could have childcare, that childcare providers could have PPE. So the organization made a decision to pivot. So then George Floyd is murdered. And over the course of about 6 weeks in May and June of 2020, Forward Through Ferguson received resources from all over the country. And instead of ending the year, in the red by 25%, they made their budget and then some and wound up having a significant operating reserve to use. But we saw this fundraiser coming up and we didn't need to have it, right? We had the resources we needed to operate. We had the resources we needed to hire staff. So what Forward Through Ferguson decided to do for this fundraiser, it was a block party called Partners in Change, is they selected 5 partner nonprofits who did different but aligned work in the community. So there's an organization called Dream Builders for Equity, which works with Black youth living in North City, the area that was affected by our tornado, helping them build homes, right? They learn the skills of construction and then they have a path to home ownership. Generate Health is an organization that reduces maternal infant mortality for Black moms and babies in our region. The Metro Trans Umbrella Group is an organization that serves our LGBTQIA plus community. We Power was another organization that builds grassroots power around education and childcare. So they decided that all the money from this fundraiser would be distributed evenly between these organizations. And at first these orgs were like, okay, wait a minute, like, what do we have to do? And we're like, you don't have to do anything. Like, you just have to give us permission to say we're giving you the money. And the board was like, are we allowed to do this? Like, are we allowed to give money away? Y'all, we can do whatever we want, right? There is no law saying, there's no policy saying, there is no one that's going to come bring the hammer down on us. if we are going to decide to move money to another C3, right? So we have this event, we distribute this money. And what it started in St. Louis was organizations co-promoting each other on our, annual 24-hour day of giving, or anytime any organization was doing public facing campaigns, these 6 organizations would take the time to promote each other with their own donor communities. Okay. They decided together that the well-being of the community eclipsed the individual success of any of their one organizations, right? Because Fort Ferguson can work on advocacy, but it doesn't matter if Black moms and babies are dying, right? It doesn't matter if our LGBTQIA population doesn't have equality and equity in our state. So they set an example, and they made it okay for folks to do different things. So yeah, Emily, we can do whatever we want. And we maybe act first and ask for permission later, because that's my favorite thing to do. So with that, I will again pop my contact information up here. Andrea, I am happy to add a slide at the end of this deck that lists out the organizations and contact information that I reference, so you can get that when you get the slides. And I am wondering if there are any big burning questions. Okay, yes. All right, I see one burning question. How do you build a culture of community-centric fundraising, philanthropy, an environment of fear-based culture where nonprofit leadership are cautious about words and afraid to share the challenge with funders? So you mean in like 95% of our nonprofit organizations right now? Yeah. So here's what I'll say. First of all, the change starts with you, right? So, what are the things about your practice of fundraising, your expression of it, that you likely need to shift and change? So, I would start there. Who are the people in your organization who are perhaps the most scared and have the most, I guess, power and influence to make determinations? What kind of information do they need to have to be less scared? I often find that when I'm in conversation with folks who don't understand community-centric fundraising, or who, I don't know, have maybe a flawed understanding of the work, providing them information, sending them to the hub, sharing examples of what community-centric fundraising has produced for organizations, is a good start. But change is long. And so I often also encourage people to like start with deciding, what are 2 or 3 things that I can shift in my development plan? What are 2 or 3 things that I can position differently with my board or my development committee? And what kind of work do I need to do to move the people who are cautious, who are scared, or who may not see community-centric fundraising as a viable option for your organization, right? So that requires us to be in hard conversations and sometimes meet people where they are. When you meet somebody where they are, you may have to use softer language. You may have to bring friends along. And I want to re-up something. When I say meet people where they are, I am not telling you to put yourselves in harm's way. I am not telling you to tolerate bad behavior or mistreatment. But I am saying that when I have made the choice to be in committed relationship with people who disagree with me, it is uncomfortable. There is an emotional burden with that work. But if I am able to stick with it in the midterm or the long term, the chances that I can build that culture, they get higher. So for us to build a culture of philanthropy that is rooted in community-centric fundraising values, we do have to be willing to experience some level of discomfort. I see another question that's about starting a CCF chapter, and I believe the whole next session is going to be about, or maybe 2 sessions from now, is going to be about building your own chapter. So I will leave it there. I'm really grateful for y'all sharing this space with me today. I know some of you have heard this presentation before, but it is an honor, again, to be a part of this community. It kind of feels like a third or fourth child is getting its wings, is graduating, is growing. And so, like I said, anything that I can do to support your journey in becoming a more community-centric fundraiser, shit disturber, fire starter, or human being that is fresh out of fucks, you have my contact information. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.